any, the C18 edit that John Midler was speaking about, it would have been a wonderful tool to assist us in ensuring minimum standard. It's not enforced yet, so we can't use that as a basis. Now, on board these vessels, the working and living conditions were horrendous. These vessels were clearly unsafe and unseaworthy. Now, you can spend a lot of time prosecuting the crimes, but you can bring that vessel out of circulation very easily if it's not maintained to certain standards.
The biggest problem that I see is one that we've talked about on numerous panels, and that's corruption. And it's not just corruption with respect to the bribing the environmental police and et cetera to look the other way. It's also corruption in the judiciary and in the prosecution offices. I'll give you an example. I was able to really build a case against Arnold Benjes in the United States based on mens rea and other things is because I was able to split cooperators. And there's no way of sugarcoating that. What that means is that I arrested people. I said, you are going to face a long prison sentence. Here's roughly what that prison sentence will be. That's par for the course, and you're welcome to go ahead and either go to trial or plead guilty and go to jail. Or you can work with the United States, cooperate, provide truthful testimony in the prosecution or investigation of another person, and you can get a lower sentence. And we were allowed to do that because we have a judicial system that is transparent and that the rule of law matters. Let me flip to something else that happened to me recently. I was in Masai Mara in Kenya, and I was asking one of the wildlife officials there, how many poachers have you arrested in the last year? And he gave me an astonishing answer. He said 40. And I was stumped because if I were prosecuting there, I would have taken each one of those 40 and I would have flipped them, and that would have turned into 2 more arrests and then 4 more arrests, and we would have had easily 200 people arrested and worked our way up the chain. That's how you do a prosecution here. That's how you do it in the United States. I said, what happened to those 40? And the guy said, I have no idea. All right. And you need to fix the corruption in all of the countries in the world, and that's what will ultimately strengthen us.
G'day, we're here at 100% protein of the whole meal, and the rest is all going to be carbohydrates or vegetable. Pan with the red pepper there. And then I got some baby marrow here, also known as, because it's close, the steam will drop back into the pan, so it will ensure that the vegetables doesn't burn. So by the time your vegetables is cooked, it will have a nice color. Then I'm going to take a little bit of cherry tomatoes. So this is almost like a Mediterranean dish. Olives. Just going to take the pip out of olives. Which is good for the cholesterol. Okay, our butter is starting to melt slowly. It's going to be sufficient, and it's going to be a nice flavor to the meat. The red pepper complements the meat, the baby marrow, everything else here is going to complement it. Your olives that you've got here is going to add a lot of flavor. It's got a lot of saltiness to it, it's got a lot of tartness to it. It's cherry tomatoes, full of sugar. Once you put it to the heat, it's going to caramelize, it's going to add to the flavor there. Now I've got a little bit of goat's cheese here as well, which is going to just cream it off nicely for us. So while the meat is cooking, I'm going to start plating the food now. Before I place that on, I'm going to take a little bit of goat's cheese at the bottom here. Put a little bit of aubergine or eggplant, top of that. Baby marrow on top of that. Some of the red pepper. So we've got a nice spectrum of colors there. Broccoli, so all these vegetables are nice and crunchy. which is what you want. All the flavor has been retained, nothing's been cooked away in water. So nice and nutritious and healthy. Meat is getting on, I'm going to turn that around. Add my cherry tomatoes to the dish. This is going to be part of my sauce. My olives. A little bit more butter. And then we're going to finish it off with some red wine. Then last but not least, fresh lemon.
Hello, my name is Jason Saul and this is Erica Saul, and welcome to ENN Network, the most informal news channel you've ever encountered in your life. We bring you stories that are related solely on the environment. We'll be bringing you interviews and current news events. We will never talk about terrorism unless it's environmental terrorism, which I expect is going to be an upcoming event in our near future as people become more and more desperate to stop the madness that is kind of driving this world. There's maybe 2 or 3 really hot trending stories at the moment, intermixed with a bunch of aggregate stories. We're going to first talk a bit of local news. So on Monday, or was it Tuesday, sorry, the coal-fire power stations had their license for water suspended. Now, this water story is an ongoing, growing situation here in South Africa. Later in the week, a huge report came out in the Western Cape saying that the Western Cape is facing severe drought. This goes hand in hand with the events going up in the Northern Cape, hand in hand with the events going up in KZN. Water is becoming more and more scarce. The cycles that normally would replenish our supplies are changing in quite a dramatic fashion. Of interest, this is not just a localized event here to South Africa. You can actually see that this is starting to occur all over the world, which actually kind of links some of our international stories that are happening at the moment. So they were basically talking about the effects of climate change on amphibians, as well as the increase in copper content in all aquifers, so river aquifers. The study was done in Australia, but then confirmed again also to be happening in the States. They are seeing mass kind of deaths of most large amphibians. These are your toads, your frogs, and due to shifting weather patterns, too much heat, when they do find a source of water, the copper levels in the water make it no longer suitable for them to exist, and frogs are dying out in the numbers. And if that doesn't alarm you, then we have the exact same story coming through from a study that is done inside of the state. And then just on Thursday, the report came out that it was impacting bees. So that they were trying to figure out what colony, why bees were kind of dying from colony collapse. And basically, it's now proven that they've done something like 64 boats. They've confiscated off illegal fishermen, and they sink them. They don't ask questions. They don't, there's no big court battles. They get the people off the boat. They drag the boat to their nearest reef, and they blow it up. And you're going to see more and more of this happening because people are starting to realize the impact that we're having on the ocean. Now, let's not forget that this week is International Recycling Week. So obviously, in that line, you had a lot of stories coming out that are related to the levels of plastic in the oceans. You're having stories coming out in relation to the kind of lifespan that plastics have while they're sitting in the environment. And we already picked up that story from late last week in relation to how the volume of plastic in the sea is outnumbering sea life something like 4 to 1. And the worst part is that even should the plastic break down, so they're quantifying it by, say, the level of output given from a land area, but so even if you were to break down the big bottles, and it's the actual microparticles that are getting into the oceans that are causing a lot of the difficulties. And you know, this is becoming more and more of a problem. People don't recycle. People continue to manufacture waste in everything, pretty much everything that we do. So if you now look, if you summarize all of those kind of stories, you take a look at the bees, where first of all we were causing colony collapse with the use of pesticides. Talk about who's going to become the next president, and also you would have been aware about various terrorism blasts around the world. But because you're now tuned to this, you can actually start to see that around you, the real story of what is happening to this planet is not based upon what Bernie Sanders is doing or whether Vladimir Putin was picked up in the Panama Papers. The real story is that around you, the environment is absolutely collapsing. It's collapsing. And we're not talking about it. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to talk about it. We're trying to bring it to your attention, and we're trying to make it viable for you.
The way a normal project would work, where they would come and negotiate because they'd have an agenda. They want to come in here and they want to start a AIDS orphanage or something like that. They would go to the chief and they'd say to the chief, we want to start up an AIDS orphanage and we want to try and employ some people and educate some people, and we want to take care of all your AIDS orphans, and for that we want some land. And the chief would think about it seriously, and he would feel important and say, yes, it's a good idea, we need these things. And there would be this trade-off, but in a way the project would then be beheld to the chief. Whereas we kind of came through the back door here. Firstly, because I came in here with a preconceived idea that this whole tribal system or traditional system was flawed anyway, and it failed. So I came in here with kind of really a judgment against this whole traditional system and things like that, you know, from what I'd heard, which is really unfair, but that's how I came in here. I sort of touched a little bit on what Contra Lesser, which is the Concrete Traditional Leaders, was all about, and it looked dodgy. In a sense, it was quite rude. I should have gone to the great place of this specific council and said, I'm here to do this. The other thing was, having worked in the Transkei before, worked in many other countries in Africa as well, is that you sort of also believe in the bush telegraph. And I sort of thought, well, what I'm doing, if it's important enough, then somebody will hear about it and they'll come and find me and say, let's meet, sort of thing, which didn't happen. So either the bush telephones didn't get there, or I just haven't been doing enough important stuff really at that level. So what that did for the project anyway was, I think, was quite beneficial in that journey of understanding what these problems are all about, because we didn't have to work to anybody's agenda or had to deliver anything to anybody. While I was busy, not sure what I was really doing, just building this island in the middle of this place that I wasn't familiar with, having never been as close to the coast. I'd worked up in Ngcobo and places like that several years before. To put in a relatively self-sustainable place and hoping that people would just be flocked and would just feel there's some kind of magnetic pull to this place, and we could teach people how to eat and to respect water and soil, and building and things like that, and get their houses stronger, which was really naive of me, I think, in hindsight. I think people are used to being herded in a way, and they just didn't. So they thought in order to engage with me, they'd have to pay me. In other words, if they want to come and make bricks, they'd have to pay me to do that, which was never in my mind, but I didn't articulate that very well, I think. So all this time I'm busy developing these gardens, I'm busy building these buildings, and sorting out these water issues and things like that. And at the same time, I'm watching it collapse around me on a greater scale. The municipality falling to pieces, the water systems falling to pieces, understanding how that's affected the whole dynamics of the community. Because I'm living inside this place and I'm seeing, and I've done this before in other places in other parts of Africa, but never with such a social dysfunctionality, which is what we've got here. So watching people's buildings fall down, and not jumping in these things and trying to save everybody, but just saying, well, tough. You know, you don't, until you decide to integrate, it's what's going to happen. Of course, because what then, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, but this main chief who was head of Contra Leske, who I was working with, died, and left this huge void suddenly that we had started, which was about leadership. And he completely saw things the way that I saw things, of understanding that present leadership was flawed, and had to be nurtured, and then to start focusing on the next leadership, the children, and to create leadership schools for these guys to come through so we can start to shift the whole thing around. Everything is based on oil.
Yeah.
Our monetary system, our judicial system, our education systems, everything on this table. Well, this is now second generation, so that's now no longer oil required. But that's our existence. Oil comes crash. I mean, we see it. I mean, yesterday, I mean, the Dow Jones fell another 3.5% yesterday. You know, you look across the board in the American markets, it's just red. They just crashed. Oil organizations went down 4 to 5%. They're just coming crashing down, and it's happening every day. They're totally overinflated because they're based on where they think the oil reserves are, not where the oil, because everybody's overselling their oil. They're saying, oh no, we've got loads of it still, because they don't want to create panic. We're into these long wars now. I mean, when you've got a country like America that's a net importer of oil, when they produce, I think about 2 to 3, not even 2% probably anymore, of the world's oil, but they use 25% of the world's oil. I mean, they have to control the world. The economy is based on it. They have to control the world's oil, which means they have to be in war. So that's what's going to go on. I mean, it's not going to stop. The only thing that's going to stop it, when there's no more oil to put in the ship, the HSS Indomitable or whatever it's called, to get it across the ocean anymore, that's when it's all going to come grinding to a halt. So we go back to this governance you're talking about. It's all based on central control. But what happens when that central control is broken? The most recent example of that happening was when Katrina went into New Orleans. And it cut off, in a first world country, okay, it cut off Washington, D.C. And within hours, people turned on people. Shops were pillaged. Next thing, people just turned on people. Okay, and that's what happens when there's chaos, when there's no more control, there's no one. So now, in a third world or developing country, when suddenly that power line is cut, it's going to be mayhem. Unless we can shift it, and we can get people and communities, let's call them transition, whatever we want to call them, all these words have been banning around, where they are taking care of themselves. Where they're not reliant upon the central system of control, which is money. And so there's something that's gone. You see, in our conditioning, and we are so conditioned, we have become codependent, where we depend upon each other. And this is really it's a disease. If we use which I do often, I use an analogy of a forest. And we see these forests where they're codependent, where the trees cross over each other and they stop the flow of air through each other, and they stop the growth. And we've seen it here. There's so much evasive stuff comes in. But if you look at a forest that each tree stands strong on its own, and then as a collective, it's incredibly strong. It's a strong, healthy environment. And it's a three-dimensional living thing then. And if we can create that where people can stand strong on their own as individuals, and then as a community, they're really, really strong. And they do things out of free will. Then we can shift the consciousness. But that goes against the religious beliefs, because that's all about codependency. I mean, goodness, it's so disempowering. It's there's this fellow who died for my sins. For goodness sakes, I'll die for my own sins. It's very disempowering, and that's where it starts. And it's been so successful. It's indoctrinated in this. I mean, in these areas that I am in. I mean, this religion that's used here now. Several versions of Christianity that are all over these areas that I'm in here. Unbelievable, the fear and the obsession with death and the amount of resources that get put into death and this dignity in death, but where's the dignity in life? And that's what we need to be focusing on, is that every moment that we have this gift of living, and let's make it count. Let's be authentic. But we're all put our belief in old mutual and funeral schemes for our death so we can be remembered. But these guys who have these, they throw these huge parties. They spent their life beating their wives, abusing their children. But they had this incredible funeral, man. It was huge. You should have seen it. Strong Muti there. No. It's disgraceful. Let's put that dignity into life now. And I really do believe that in this religion that existed before we came along with this whole sort of Christianity trip and things like that, was this incredible dynamic relationship between the earth and the people in Africa. You know, they call it Kwamata or something like that, and it's brilliant. It's so naive. It's brilliant because it's got counterbalance. It's just based in love and respect. And you know, if you respect the sun for rising, for setting, you respect the seasons. You show respect to the animal you kill to nurture yourself. You respect your spouse or your kids. Or, you know, suddenly here come these guys and saying, "Oh, hold on, you guys are savages unless you bow down to this figure here. That's it. You're going to go and die a miserable death in hell and things like it." And how could people come here with anything but love anyway? Because that's all we believe in is love. Okay, so this is how people are building here. People without much means, which is called a wattle and daub. So here you got your wattle, which is your wooden framework, but love goes into this wall, and that's why we're using cements and things like that, because it's practical and it gives it longevity. Now if you go into some of your sort of Central American Santa Fe, those sort of areas, for them, which they use the adobe blocks, which is also just sort of sun-dried bricks, clay bricks, for them to come once a year, and the woman would come and they would repair the cracks, because they're also in very adverse dry conditions, where the bricks create wonderful insulation for their homes. It works really nicely for them. But for them, it's part of their cultural heritage. They celebrate the renewal every year, where they would fix up their cracks, that make big clay pits and create a render. That's part of who they are, and their yearly existence, their yearly rebirthing. Yeah, this is clay which we've got locally here. Now, it's quite a strong clay actually, prone to cracking, but it could be worked through a lot better. You fill this with your mix, okay, with a very little bit amount of water, and then you'll put this on it, and you'll push it down, which is your primary compaction. All right. Then take that over, and then this is where you'll notice the bottom is coming up. Yes. So it's compacting from the bottom. So there's your compaction. Alright, so it's compacting up. Up it goes, and it pops the brick out, which should be up there now. 2 people could make a brick every 17 seconds. Yeah. But you get machines now that can do 12 bricks at once, doing the same. But the nice thing about it is that, as opposed to the machines that can make 1,500 bricks a day, there's a huge effect on the environment, where you're actually getting, that's a hungry machine, and where you're getting that material from. Whereas this here, it's more hand. You can use the foundations of your building to build the walls up. It doesn't have to have such a negative effect on the environment. They're not fully set yet, so I don't want to mess with them too much. So it's 240 mils long, and it's 100 high, and it's 140 wide, which from an engineering perspective is perfect for a wall. You can support a roof with this lightweight roof, and it'll be fine. This has got to set for about 3 weeks. This digester, which I designed, it's a closed bag. Well, it's got an inlet and an outlet and a gas outlet. So it's made from reinforced PVC, which is the same material as you'll make a jumping castle from. And it's shaped. The shape of it is like a loaf of bread. It's risen. So it has the convex top on it, and everything else is squared. It fits into this frame here that I just built with brick. And how it works is it comes from the toilets. The waste comes into the I can also feed it with green material, which produces most of. If I really want to get a lot of push my my methane levels up, I'll feed it with some bananas or stuff like that, which boosts it. It comes in here, and inside here I have a live culture, which is anaerobic, which means that it exists without oxygen. Okay. So it's the digestion process is anaerobic as opposed to aerobic, which is like your composting loos and things like this. So the microbes that exist inside here break down the waste very, very efficiently, and the energy that comes out of that is the methane gas. Now, if you can smell, Judy, which it's almost a composty smell. There's not necessarily a sewage smell, but there's a slight composty smell. If you come close down here, you could almost smell the gas as well, which is when you burn it, there's no smell whatsoever. Again, it's a composty one. It's not necessarily unpleasant. We'll fill this with green material, with anything, and we'll just get some water and shove it down. It's a big stomach. That's how it really works. There's the enzymes that are breaking down the material inside there, and from that they create methane gas, and they create high nutrient water. Now there have been sort of many household biodigestion systems that are coming out. There are about 6 cubic meters prefabricated systems that cost probably about 35,000-40,000 rands, and they're not high gas yielding, but what they are doing is they're breaking down the water, the black water, the effluent water, which is really critical. And so therefore the principles are very much along these lines. This is just a bit more rudimentary. And so from here the water will go through a sand filter, which is what this is, which we've got. Obviously there's high nutrients in here. We've still got about 5 to 7% pathogens, which is your E. coli, etc., coming into here, which then these plant life will take it out. So it'll come into here, it will filtrate down through the slow sand filter. Underneath here, about a meter down, there's a hole, and it'll come up here, which this is full of shells like this, and charcoal, which then absorb the last remnants of pathogens. Okay, that's what this one, and the reeds, of course, as well, take out anything. So it's we really have removed as much. I mean, if there's anything left, it's absolute trace elements. The water will gather in here and settle, and then will slowly gravitate down through our trees and our orchards, which are down that side, which is high nutrient water, which you can drink. It'll give you a bit of a stomach ache because it's high in nutrients, but certainly nothing poisonous. And but it's very good for growth of the trees and plants. We've got coffee trees down there, which is a long nutrient release bed, which is like a double dug bed, and then above it we've got layers where we've got decomposing materials at various stages, plus cow manure. That's very rich if you look at that. If we look around here, of course, sod's law, we won't find any, but there's worms everywhere as well that are working away. Perhaps if we look in one of the other ones. And then we cover that all up. Right now, because it's winter, we have quite a bit of dew, and this mulch here is holding that water, because we're in drought now, is holding that water on the ground. Plus